Hey everybody, it's Jay, and today I wanted to take a look at a fairly recent acquisition, my most recent sword acquisition. This is a cane. It's not really a cane, it's a sword. You can probably tell it's a sword because it's shaped like this and not really like a cane. This is a Zatoichi Shirasaya, and I actually picked this up on eBay, and I'll put in the comments or in the title of this video what the seller was that I got this from. But all of the pictures, the style, and everything appeared to all be the same ones that were on the Swords of Northshire page. And they're generally pretty well regarded. They seem to be generally pretty well regarded in the sword community. And the one that I got from eBay was about $100 less than the one that's on Swords of Northshire. So I don't actually know if this came from the same place as Swords of Northshire or not, or if it is just an eBay copy. Regardless, I'm going to review it for what it is. What we have is 1095 high carbon steel sword. It is differentially hardened and clay tempered, so the hamon, which you might be able to see on camera, I don't know if you can or not, is real. It is genuine. Sometimes what they'll do on swords is they'll wire etch a hamon, so it'll be a fake hamon or a pseudo hamon. Hamon. I'm probably not saying that right. I'm not Japanese, sorry. This one in particular is supposedly modeled on the one from the Zatoichi movie that came out, I believe, in 2001. And to that extent, it is similar, but there are some notable differences. Hey everybody, it's Editing Jay, and I wanted to insert a little note here with some information that I've learned since I recorded this video that's relevant to the rest of the information that I present. So this is called a Zatoichi Shirasaya. The key word there is Shirasaya. And what the Shirasaya were used for was effectively a mounted storage solution for a live katana blade that samurai would use depending on the political climate and when they were able to actually carry swords. So this really mimics that historical use of a Shirasaya and explains why I run into some issues that I run into that I'll talk about later on in the video. Because in effect, this design is not really meant for use. Unlike with the Zatoichi cane sword that Zatoichi uses in the movie, which is designed for functional use as both a cane and as a weapon, this is really more, or the Shirasaya I should say, is really more intended for storage. So it is kind of interesting because it's called Zatoichi, and going back and looking at the listing on Swords of Northshire, it doesn't say Zatoichi sword, it says Zatoichi weapon, not sword, which is also kind of interesting. So keep all of that in mind as you watch the rest of this video, and I will let you get back to it. The sword in that movie appears to be a lot smaller, or at least the blade itself appears to be quite a bit smaller than this one. This one seems quite large. Now, when I first got this sword, I noticed that the saya was pretty loose. So the saya was the scabbard here, was pretty loose. And I could hold it like this, and it would slide down the habaki, or the guard, or not the guard, I should say, the retainer for the scabbard. Which, if you're using it as a cane, you wouldn't necessarily want to walk around and have that saya just fall off. So what I did is I ended up shimming the scabbard and drew it in and out to where, until it was fairly easy to pull. Another thing that I've noticed is the blade is a little loose in the scabbard. Not whenever it's fully mounted, but if you'll notice, it's very easy to accidentally drag that blade against the front of the scabbard. And what ends up happening here is you end up sliding the edge right against the wood. With a traditional katana, which I can show you here, we'll use a wakizashi. When you draw the sword from the saya, you do so with the spine downward, and what that does is that keeps the blade, the edge, I should say, from rubbing against the wood. It's very difficult to do that with this sword because of how loose it sits in the scabbard. Plus, with it being a completely straight blade, you don't get any of the sort of the help with guiding it away from the scabbard. So you have to be very careful when sheathing this sword to keep the edge from running in to the scabbard. So I did go ahead and get out and do some cutting tests with this, and it cut perfectly well after I sharpened it. Before I sharpened it, I had a really hard time cutting even soft targets with it. And I think really that comes from just the edge being dulled from being drawn in and out of the scabbard. It could have been that way from the factory. It's very possible. So I did end up sharpening it myself. There is a very slight secondary bevel edge now on this, but that wasn't there before. Before it was just one continuous bevel all the way down to the edge. But I was then able to get really good cuts with it. I went ahead and tried it on some tatami, and first swing it just sliced right through very easily, no problem. It wasn't so great for pool noodles. It struggled a little bit with there. The pool noodles tended to bounce off. Soft targets, bottles, and stuff were not that big of a deal either. One challenge, though, with getting good and consistent cuts with it is that the blade is actually quite thick. You may not really be able to tell in reference, but the blade is thick. So the point of balance on this thing is really far forward of the grip. You can see it's about right there of the grip. That's a bit of a problem when you're trying to get good edge alignment, because that extra weight, that blade heavy weight, tends to want to twist that blade out of your hand. So it makes it a little bit difficult to do. The lack of a guard here is a little bit risky. You have to really make sure that your hand's not going to slide off and hit that blade. And further, drawing is a little bit tricky because on the movie version, like I said, they're scalloping, and so I'm sure you could tell from the direction of the scallops by feel where your edge is pointing. With this, the only thing I can do is say, okay, the pins here that hold the blade into the grip are closer to the back end, so I know as long as these are basically facing down, then I'm going to draw with the blade edge up. So that can be a little bit difficult. From a construction standpoint, and I think this also throws the balance off a little bit, is the grip. I went ahead and popped the pins out. I'm blanking on what the Japanese names are. I normally know them for some reason. Mikugi, I think. I popped them out. Took a look at the tang just to make sure that the tang looked good. The good news is the tang actually does look good. The bad news is that you can tell that the handle, or the grip, I keep trying to do that, the grip is one of these prefab things that wasn't actually fitted to this blade. So it's just a big hollow piece. So if there was a little bit more weight, like if this was a solid core grip, I think that would help that blade balance a little bit. But because it's hollow, it's very, very light on the tang side. Further, after I took the Mikugi out and I went ahead and pulled the filling out that was in there, there's like these 2 cloth strips and a plastic band that help. Well, I'll tell you what it does here in a second. Once I took those out, I put the blade back into the grip and swung it around a few times, and the blade was quite loose in the grip. So I ended up having to put the cloth and the plastic back in, drive the Mikugi back through, and that seemed to resolve that issue. It's very solid now in the grip. But one thing that I noticed is after I remounted the grip, you can see that this continuous line is broken up now. It doesn't sit flush anymore. It's just a little bit off. So it's a shame that they didn't put a little bit more effort into the grip, because the blade profile and the edge geometry is pretty good. The blade is a little too thick, but the grip just, I think, doesn't quite ruin it, but it definitely cheapens it a lot. The other thing too is the Mikugi started to walk out, these little bamboo pins. So I just put a little bit of wood glue on there and then drove them back through, and they've held up fine ever since. They're still removable, But yeah, they would not stay in, which means, again, I think that they probably had some pre-drilled holes or something along those lines, and the Mokugi were not fit, or the holes were not fit to the Mokugi that they had. So there's definitely some questionable things about this from a construction standpoint. It was an under $300. It cost me $290 shipped from China, so it's not exactly a super high-end sword. I still like it fine, but yeah, there are definitely some things that could be improved. But for the most part, though, I think it's probably worth checking out if you're interested, because there's not really a lot of people doing Shirasaya, and most of the ones I see seem to be just random Chinese sword sellers. So this one, at the very least, I didn't have any chipping, edging, or rolling on the edge. So the 1095 is pretty good. It is full tang, like I said. So there are some positives to it. I think that the handle is a negative for sure. There's probably a way that somebody could do a better job shimming that if they wanted to try to improve it, but just something to watch out for. This is Jay. Hope you liked the video. Please click like if you did. Be sure to check out our backlog and subscribe to us if you haven't already. And be sure to check out the link to our Patreon page if you're interested in helping support us. And we'll see you again soon next time.